You see that.
Let's go.
Welcome to the first of a series of podcasts about American Polish connectivity, structured around Dr. Bogdan Kotnis' historical novel, Kaz, War, Love, and Betrayal. I'm Robert Terzian. I'll be the moderator for a series of conversations with Dr. Bogdan Kotnis. I enjoyed reading Kaz, and I noticed many parallels to modern events, so I contacted the author. Um, we had several very interesting conversations about the book and about geopolitics, and Bogdan made me see world events from a kind of a fresh perspective. And I thought it would appeal to a wider audience. So we agreed to record this series of interviews. Dr. Kotnis, welcome. Thanks for sharing your insights into global and Polish history and geopolitics from a Polish perspective. So tell us what your book Kaz is all about.
Hi, Bob, and greetings to all who decided to listen to us and watch us. I appreciate all your interest in Polish-American synergy through history. My book, Kaz, War, Love, and Betrayal, is a story of Casimir Pulaski. I called him Kaz in the book to make things easier. He was a trailblazer of the American-Polish Brotherhood in arms. And the book is a historical adventure that shows the beginnings of American and Polish ties, which are so critical, I think, especially today, given the Russian aggression in Ukraine that threatens the world peace we have enjoyed since the end of World War II, actually.
So, Bogdan, you mentioned the United States, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, and the world. How do they all fit into your book, and how important is it to consider these countries?
Well, I show Kaz, the main protagonist, confronting Russians on the territory that including today's Ukraine. Poles and Russians fought over this land for at least 800 years, and Ukraine is a country only 30 years. So all three countries are intimately involved in Ukraine today, and understanding their long-term complicated relationship should help us here in the United States resolve the conflict so that the world peace is not compromised. I believe that we should carefully look at all these essential countries to understand the context of current Russian aggression. And remember, like a lot of us, I was shocked when Russia's little green man annexed eastern Ukraine in 2014, ripping apart European peace. From the beginning of that conflict, the role of Poland was mostly downplayed, while Germany and France led an effort to appease the Russians. Sadly, this approach didn't give us much. It actually encouraged Russia, and they attacked Ukraine in 2022 even more brutally. The shock that the 2022 attack caused shows us that our analysts must study the region more carefully. And I believe that reading Kaz will help us understand the root causes of today's war.
Before we go on, viewers, let me introduce our novelist. Bogdan lived about 30 years in Poland and then 30 years in the United States. He holds a master's degree from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, which is the oldest Polish university, and a PhD from the State University of New York at Buffalo. He speaks Polish, English, Russian, Ukrainian, Danish, German, and Spanish, and listens to global news in all of these languages. So you can imagine what kind of insight this kind of experience yields.
Well, Bob, thanks for the generous intro. And you, the viewers, should know that Robert Terzian, Esquire, is a retired U.S. government attorney who closely follows national and global policy developments.
Thank you, Bogdan. I see three main themes in your book: correct me if I'm wrong, but I see the novel's plot, a Polish perspective on the Russian threat then and I guess today, and American-Polish cooperation. Do you agree?
I think you got it. You got it, Bob. I had all these three themes in mind when writing Kaz. Uh, Let me tell you, a recognized author, James Conroy Martin, noted in his Amazon review of Kaz that it's a hybrid. It's two books in one. It's a combination of an action and adventure novel and the historical analysis of events.
Well, we'll explore all of these themes in greater detail throughout subsequent interviews, but let's start today with the first, which is the plot. What's Kaz all about?
Uh, Kaz, the book tells the story of a patriotic Pole, Casimir Pulaski, fighting Russians who are attacking Poland then to grab more land. My novel starts with the manipulations by Russian Empress Catherine the Great to ensure that her protege, a Polish nobleman, Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski, was elected Polish king.
Elected. That's a surprise. Is that what you said? You elected the king?
Yeah, elected the king. You know, it was a long tradition. Poles decided that when the king died without an heir, they would elect a new king. The first election happened in 1573. So last year is actually was the 450th anniversary of the first election of the Polish king. And the king also had to agree to a long list of privileges to the citizens, reducing his absolute power. You can imagine that all countries in Europe ruled by absolute monarchs hated this Polish practice. But interestingly, the concept of election ultimately found its way into the US Constitution and that of Poland, which was the first European nation to draft a constitution about 5 years after the US.
That's quite interesting. But I did interrupt your response about the origins of your novel. Please continue.
No problem, Bob. So going back to Catherine, Catherine's manipulations weakened Poland so much that Russia, along with Prussia and Austria, were able to eliminate Poland from the map for 123 years in a three-step partition. In the first half of the book, I tell a story of Poland's resistance to this Russian incursion through the experiences of a Polish nobleman, Count Casimir Pulaski, Kaz, hoping that readers would learn about Poland's historical opposition to an ever-aggressive Russia bent on territorial expansion. Russian actions in Ukraine today, for me, mirror what Catherine did in Poland over 250 years ago. And the second half of the book, taking place in America, shows how Kaz's experience and involvement helped the United States fight for a country against the British. In both countries, Kaz fought for national independence against absolute powers.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about how writing an historical novel in English about Polish and American history some 250 years ago connects us to some of those other events you described today.
First, I wanted to show the beginning of this continuing brotherhood in arms and shared political values between the United States and Poland. And since we all like stories, I decided to write an hopefully exciting story about one of those military heroes who spilled blood for Poland and the United States, Count Casimir Pulaski. Kaz was a colonel in the Polish War against Russia, and then a general in George Washington's army, playing a crucial role in the American War of Independence. You look at it, he was the first American general to fight the Russians. And then second, I intended to excited curiosity about Poland and its relationship to America, I think is missing now. I'm convinced that Poland and the United States are siblings in democracy and absolutely vital to each other's national interests, mainly as they cooperate in opposing Russian aggression today. And my novel describes events that set the stage for understanding the origins of the Polish-American bond and the mutually advantageous partnership that is so critical to both and the world today. I hope to resurrect American interest in Poland and capture a desire in America to recognize and celebrate its common bonds with Poland more fully.
These seem like noble goals, but can you tell us a little bit more about General Kaz Pulaski, who's the protagonist in this novel?
Sure. In Poland, Kaz is famous for engaging in a 5-year-long war called the Bar Confederacy against the Polish king and Russia. The novel follows him from the election of the last Polish king, King Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski, or King Stan, as I call him in the book. And so we are in Poland with Kaz from 1763 to 1772, and he had to leave the country at the war's end. And then in 1777, Kaz arrived in the United States, and we stayed with him until his heroic death in Savannah, Georgia in 1779.
So who was this King Stan exactly?
Yeah, King Stan. Well, I think he was a Russian puppet installed on the Polish throne by Russia's Catherine the Great. You know, much like the Russians recently installed President Lukashenko in Belarus and then President Yanukovych in Ukraine. King Stan's election and reign were disastrous for Poland and eventually led to Poland's partitions between Russia and Austria in 1795. When Russians and King Stan forced Kaz to leave Poland, he traveled through Europe, including Turkey, to raise funds and support for the Bar Confederacy, which was the name of a legally registered opposition to King Stan and his catastrophic obeisance to Russia. Kaz was introduced to Benjamin Franklin in France, who at that time was looking for experienced officers willing to fight for the United States.
So we go from Poland to the United States. I gather that meeting Franklin is the reason you ended up talking about Kaz in the United States?
You're right, Bob. Franklin recommended Kaz to Congress and General Washington. Consequently, Kaz sailed to the colonies and met with Washington, but had to wait for Congress to grant him a commission in Washington's army first. But even before he won the commission, Kaz was able to convince Washington to change his plans for the Brandywine battle and let Kaz lead a cavalry charge during that battle. And this decision saved Washington's army, as some analysts say, from a total defeat during this largest battle of the Revolutionary War, and expedited Kaz's commission to the rank of brigadier general. He then trained our cavalry according to the Polish standards. He wrote the first U.S. cavalry manual and introduced a new military doctrine which used cavalry as a strike force rather than merely a transport and reconnaissance outfit, how the British were using it mostly. And these accomplishments won Kaz the name of father of the American cavalry.
Well, I bet most of my fellow Americans don't know very much about that history. Fascinating. But what I'm hearing you say is that the novel is telling how the emerging U.S. and fading Poland shared some of the same military heroes and strategies for fighting for national independence. Seems to reflect a pretty positive example of U.S. General deferring to unique Polish experience. And suggests that the two nations' joint commitment to the revolutionary idea of elected leadership or democracy is deep. Is this where you're headed?
Exactly, Bob. The Polish-American bond began then and then has continued as the enduring fraternity of shared ideas tested on the battlefields. And in this bond continued in subsequent world events in which the US played a leading substantive role in supporting Poland. So strengthening this bond diplomatically and in the eyes of the public is strategically more important today, I believe, than ever since the 18th century.
So you're trying to tell us something about how Kaz's adventures relate to the current time. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, those events afford me a platform explaining how the Russian motivation has remained the same over centuries. I wanted to reveal Russia's leading political motivation, which has been to fight their way west until they control the whole of Europe. And Russians have repeatedly stated this intention lately, but the West has not responded in any meaningful way, I believe. And again, understanding this historic and unwavering Russian expansionist commitment should help us formulate a winning strategy for stopping them in Ukraine today. The strategy is missing in our debates. Believing that we can appease Russians with anything is a mistake. They consider any appeasement a sign of weakness, and it motivates them to continue their conquest.
So you've used the word appeasement a couple of times, and what do you mean by it? And what are the alternatives?
I believe that appeasement is a way to avoid war by agreeing to aggressors' demands. And the calculation is kind of that these concessions will satisfy the aggressor and the war can be avoided. But in the case of the war in Ukraine, much like in the case of the war in Poland at the beginning of World War II, these concessions were a mistake and gave the aggressor time to get even stronger before the actual attack. So I believe it's a bad strategy.
It sounds a little like you're saying the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a deja vu experience that inspired your novel.
Exactly, Baba. You can definitely say that. For me, the Russian approach to Europe has remained the same since the 18th century. When you look at it closely, you would see that. Well, first of all, my novel starts in the final years of a process similar to hybrid warfare today, by which Russia ended the longest-lasting elective monarchy, the largest European nation, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And I believe that understanding this process helps discover Russia's undying commitment to its long-term strategy leading to today's war in Ukraine. And let me just go back to history a little bit. There was this Tsar Peter the Great who formulated the Russian manifest destiny over 300 years ago, and Russia remains committed to it until today. Through wars, revolutions, and name changes of the country, they keep on pushing west.
Well, that's interesting, Bogdan. But changing direction just a bit, didn't you actually experience Russian rule firsthand when you lived in Poland?
Yeah, Bob, I certainly did. And these were brutal times, very depressing. And when writing the book, my personal experience was constantly on my mind. I witnessed the same pattern of threats, corruption, and lies that Kaz suffered in the 18th century and that Russia employs today in Ukraine. Our American and most Western analysts, I believe, they are unwilling or unable to see this well-established pattern. Instead, they focus primarily on current events, imbued with this gullible attitude of regarding Russia almost as a maladjusted child who needs love and respect to make it change its ways. Consequently, I see that our experts are constantly surprised by facts on the ground in Russia and around them. But Russians understand this weakness and use it to their advantage. So this narrow focus in the West is for me the West's Achilles heel in dealing with the Russians. We should dig deeper into history to see and deal with Russian core motivation effectively and understand their use of hybrid warfare and not just pay attention to daily comments they make.
What exactly do you mean by hybrid warfare?
Well, hybrid warfare is a chain of manipulations, propaganda, and terrorist attacks that are done under a threshold of classic kinetic warfare. And the objective is to confuse the victim's country so that it cannot clearly describe what's going on. And it's very confused. Sometimes you don't even know who's to be blamed for the mess. And Russians have been consistently using this stratagem. And look, today, Russia is the largest and the most aggressive country in the world, but they consistently oppose the world order the free world has built since the end of World War II. Why would they do it? I think it's because this world order does not give Russians what they wanted when they started World War II, which was the total domination of Europe. And remember that our American soldiers rushed to Berlin in 1945 to defend the Germans, to defeat the Germans, but also to stop the Russians from advancing further west. At that time, we Americans and our Western allies bought into the Russian propaganda that Russia was merely defending itself when it invaded Poland in 1939. So still, the Cold War confirmed that Russia did not share Western values, and they just bamboozled us into working with them.
Well, you startled me again. You said that Russia started World War II. That surely differs from what I learned. I guess this is a Polish perspective, and it's quite interesting. Can you say a few words about it?
I understand what you're saying, Bob. I read books. I watch the news. But here I'm just trying to be very open and clear because we're missing that point of view. And I want to focus on Russians, which were the Germans' partners in the crime of invading Poland in 1939. And I see that the US underplays this German-Russian partnership in a misguided effort to smooth the edges of history and American mainstream narrative. I see that the American public education mostly omits the Russian brutal attack on Poland, but by skipping Russia's role as a German partner in crime from our mainstream narrative, we avoid admitting to appeasing Russians after World War II, in part with Polish independence. And you know that Poland bashing is quite popular in the United States. But Russians knew it was an alliance of convenience, not based on any shared values or commitment to a particular world order. So they pushed us hard already in 1945, which then led to the Cold War. But for domestic consumption in the United States, it was never honestly explained, and a lot of their atrocities they committed never really saw light of the day for the average American public. So we continue hearing mostly about the Germans as the sole aggressors. But I think that to explain our post-World War II aid to Germany, we started using the term Nazis when describing the Germans in World War II. And this labeling or rebranding helped us sell the idea of aid to the Germans. But today, this ruse enables the Russian leaders to sell the idea that opposing Nazism and the West justified their attack on Ukraine in 2022. It's pretty bizarre. They said that they were merely defending themselves against Ukrainian Nazis.
Well, that's a lot, but you are saying that Russia and Germany both attacked Poland in 1939.
Absolutely, absolutely. Russians and Germans planned the September 1939 attack on Poland together and carefully coordinated the assault. And arguing who shot the first shot only helps Russians manipulate the facts and support their propaganda. The truth is that the Russians annexed half of Poland then and killed quite a number of people. Uh, Whatever Poland lost to the Russians in 39 today belongs to Ukraine, Belarus, or Lithuania. Even before the start of World War II, Russians killed hundreds of thousands of Poles in the Soviet Union in a genocidal campaign of ethnic cleansing just to prepare for the war.
So I'm beginning to understand that Poles have a pretty long time view of history that shapes the Polish perspective. And you assert that that perspective is being overlooked.
Yeah, you know what? Poland's perspective is defined through over 1,000-year history, and it doesn't hurt. Kind of like looking at the whole time, during which Poland has persisted as a distinct culture and identity. And this Polish perspective is a missing link in the current analysis of the Russian invasion. Russia actually entered the world stage as a dominant power after destroying Europe's largest country, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. If you do the math, the Commonwealth collapsed in 1795. So it shows that Poland had an 800-year-long track record of success and then 123 years of lost independence. And then the enemies of Poland used that time when Poland was not around to create this grotesque image of Poland that we see most of the time today. And CAS is my vehicle for drawing attention to the past to understand the present. So it shows a well-established Russian aggressive posture and practice and honors the Polish and American patriots' resolve to stand up to oppression. I see the Polish perspective to the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a proof that Poles quickly recognized this war as a continuation of long-term Russian strategy aimed at conquering the whole of Europe. The Polish perspective is broader, revealing similar patterns in Russian strategy and tactics over centuries. And if our leaders and public better understood and carefully considered this Polish perspective, I think we would be united in formulating a winning strategy concerning Russia and the meaning of its invasion of Ukraine today.
So when did you start thinking about the importance of Polish-American cooperation?
I remember I had a Fulbright professor in Poland in the 70s, Eugene Metcalf, Professor Metcalf from Miami University, Ohio, and he traveled to Poland then and taught us American literature amid those gloomy Soviet times. And I was impressed by how much he taught me and how much he trained to learn from us, the students. And he opened my mind to looking at events from multiple perspectives, both in Poland, in the United States, and the world. And then when I eventually came to the United States, I found that this Polish perspective was mainly missing in the American debate. And especially since the current Russian aggression in Ukraine, neglecting Polish view is a strategic oversight. So I've just decided to open my mouth.
So by incorporating the Polish perspective, we would more clearly see through the Russian technique. What do you call that?
Well, they use the word maskirovka. I like it to describe what's going on there. And incorporating the Polish perspective in our American analysis helps us more clearly see through Russian maskirovka, the term they use for manipulation. We've been living under a delusion created by our short-sightedness and Russian propaganda that Russia was a peaceful nation seeking equal partnership in Europe and would never attack Ukraine. Remember? So how many times are we going to fall for the same lie? So I believe that recognizing the vitality of the Polish perspective throughout history allows us to see how the fate of Poland and the United States is connected through shared interest in democracy and the bond of brotherhood in arms from the first days of the Revolutionary War.
Wow, that's so interesting. We've got a lot to unpack, but we've been going for about 30 minutes, so I suspect that we ought to stop here. Thank you for this first interview, and let's pick this up next time and explore some of these many issues that you've mentioned. And you, as the viewer, if you want a broader context of current events than you can find in our mass media, tune in to the following interviews. We'll focus in more detail on the book, explore the roots of Polish-American cooperation, and that Polish perspective on the continuing threat. Thank you so much for your interest in today's broadcast. We appreciate your comments and questions. Please do submit them. They'll help us make these interviews more relevant to you. Please join us in the continuing dialogue as we reveal more insights into CAS and the global situation affecting our way of life. Until next time.
Yeah, thanks, Etan, and hopefully see you again. Goodbye.